Shalom and welcome to another edition here on the Genesis 49ers page, where we say no to vague interpretations and we give thorough breakdowns. And the reason why I start off with that slogan, because there's a lot of people that think interpretation equals scripture or truth. We have to give validation behind our words. We can't be overly religious, cannot be dogmatic, super dogmatic, where you just do it based on a religious leader. He said so. Your church leader, your bishop, your deacon. And beyond that, you can't prove it. So we're not here for that. Genesis 49ers is here to reform the minds of brothers and sisters, to truly edify. Edify means to build upon your knowledge, not indoctrinate you, rather educate you. With that being stated, today's topic is Hebraic Indian affinity. Hebraic Indian affinity. Because we have a doctrine against what we know as the 12 tribes chart. And the 12 tribes chart just gives us an idea of the 12 tribes, the 12 tribes and the 10 tribes in particular in America and the ancient Americas, which we can prove that the early Indians, and I'm just using the word Indians for the viewer that may not know that they're Israelites, so you can recognize who I'm referring to. In the American Indians, okay, of antiquity were Israelites, and we're going to provide the proof, and we're going to provide source material to show you that these people link up with the ancient Hebraic people. Now, the people that are against the 12 tribes chart and against saying that the Native Americans, the Indians, are Israelites, they will use the same methodology to prove that the West Africans are Israelites, which here on Genesis 49ers, we teach and we believe that certain groups of West Africans, the brothers in Ghana, Igbo, Yoruba, Fulani, the Lyango tribe, the Limba, we believe that they're Israelites, and the Limba are the South Africans. We believe there's Israelites in Africa, just like we believe there's Israelites in Europe, and we believe they're in China. We believe that. And Shinam, right? China, Japan, we believe that. But that doesn't negate the fact that there were Israelites of antiquity on this side of the world. Like when you bring out Deuteronomy 33:17, when it says that Ephraim will push his brothers into the ends of the earth. That's not Africa. That's not Europe. That's not China. That's talking about the Western Hemisphere and America. And nobody can refute that. With no further ado, let's get into the actual lesson. First slide, I want to bring up a scripture. The book of Amos, chapter 8. In verse 11, it says, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord God, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of the hearing of the words of the Lord." Now, this is referring to the northern kingdom, because Amos was a prophet to the northern kingdom. The Lord was like, okay, you don't want to listen. Okay, now I'm going to block it where you can't listen at all. And that was a period of time where it was just, northern kingdom of Israel was into pure wickedness. There's only a few of us that were righteous. You discover that information by Tobit, okay, after the expulsion, right? It says, "And they shall wander from sea to sea." Now that's a key point, because a lot of our people say, and a lot of people in general, I'm not going to just say our people, oh, the Israelites were never mariners. They were never seafarers. Even though we have a whole chapter dedicated to seafaring, right? And Ezekiel, I think of the 23rd chapter, when it talks about Judah was into trade by the way of ships. Dan was trading with Javan, so on and so forth. And Genesis tells you that Zebulun will be a harbor of ships. But they don't take that into consideration. But the scripture says they should wander from sea to sea. So guess what? We had to travel via sea. Now, somebody that isn't intelligent will say, where are the ships in this scripture? It's inferred to travel from sea to sea. They didn't swim. They had to be mariners. They had to go via ships. And this led them to discovering America. This wandering from sea to sea. And I did videos, The Israelites Discovered America. You can go check that out. By the way of the sea, Indian and Hebraic documents proving these things. So check those videos out to get historical clarity on those facts. It says it's from the north even to the east, because that's where they were located, in the north. And a lot of the Israelites would go to the east, which was Babylon and Assyria, okay, of Israel. It says they shall run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord and shall not find it. And that day shall fair virgins and young men faint for thirst, because we were being starved out. All right, and our kingdom, and that's exactly how the Romans did us too. They starved us out, trapped us, cut off all food and water coming into the city, and then we just starved. Verse 14 says, they that swear by the sin of Samaria and say, thy God, O Dan, liveth. Now, a lot of people go to the scripture and say, oh, see, this is when the Lord cut off Dan. This is not what this scripture is talking about. The scripture is talking about from Dan to Beersheba, meaning the whole northern kingdom. It says, O Dan liveth in the manner of Beersheba liveth. That compasses the whole northern kingdom. Even they shall fall and never rise up again, because they fell as the kingdom of Samaria. It fell. It didn't rise up as a governing power. It came back as a vassal state under either Judas Maccabees, but never was a power on its own. So we had a large group of Israelites that would wander from sea to sea, and that's why I brought that out. And that's how they got into the Americas. If you want the long version of that, I've done plenty of videos on this topic. Go check out my videos. My video name, Israelites Discovered America, and you can see the historical documents to provide the clarity on that claim. Next slide. All right. First slide into the presentation after the verse is fruit. And it says, a legend of the dog-rib Indians. In the beginning, the first great parent gave to his children, mankind, two sorts of fruit, one white and one black. He commanded them to eat the white fruit, but they should not, without permission, eat the black fruit for food. A snake tempted them to eat the black fruit, which made the great father angry. And the source is The Great Migration by Jeremy Fitzgerald Lee, page 47. And so the Native Indians had the fall of man story. All of the same elements. When told to eat this particular fruit, they ate it by the way of the tempting of the snake, of a serpent. Same way we see it written in Genesis. Now, a lot of people say, oh, they were just taught that by the white man because the Bible was... Here's the thing. The white man wasn't teaching them the Old Testament when they came over here. Or what do you call the white man, quote unquote, because I'm against using color to identify race. That's very confusing, because you have white Chinese, white Arabs. Skin color doesn't make your race. But for understanding purposes, I will use it so you can understand who I'm referring to. Now, they came over here, the Puritans or whatever, they came over here and they only wanted to teach the slaves and the what we call Native Indians, which were slaves as well, the New Testament. They only taught them New Testament and few principles. Oh, just believe in Jesus and stuff like that. They didn't go into teaching them history and teaching them the Old Testament. They rarely went into that. So next slide. The sea news. It says they also cut a piece of the thigh of every deer they kill and throw it away. The source, History of the North American Indians by James Adair, page 138. Why is that important? They would not eat the sinew. They would not eat the hollow of the thigh of their kills, because that was a tradition to them. That was a law. They wouldn't eat it. It says Genesis 32, verse 32. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which is upon the hollow of the thigh upon this day, because he touched the hollow of the thigh and the sinews that strength. So they keep that ancient law. They kept it. You can't put that law on anybody else. This is the ancient Hebraic law of the Israelite, the children of Israel. This is what they did. So this is a signet upon them to show you that, oh, wait a minute, these are Israelites. Irrefutable proof. And James Adair lived amongst these Native Indians for 40 years, observing them, learning their languages, learning their customs. That's why he's a primary source. Next slide. Ashitu, King Ashitu. It says exactly as the wicked king, referring to the Pharaoh in the Bible of Exodus. It says, in the Mexican legend was punished with hail, tempest, and fire, frogs and toads, locusts and lice. And that source, The Great Migration by Jeremy Fitzgerald Lee, page 114. And he was quoting The Myths of Mexico and Peru by L. Spence. Okay? We have a history that's written in the Mexican Chronicle, ancient Mexican or Mexica Chronicles, about a wicked king being punished with plagues. Very similar to the plagues that's written in the Bible. We got the frogs, the lice. We have the frost, the hail. We have all those things, the tempest. We have all those things written in this story of King Ashitu. The Most High will punish this king known as Ashitu in the Mexican Chronicles. Very similar to the Hebraic story. Why? Because they are the descendants or the progeny of these Hebraic fathers that experienced and went through these things. Next slide. All right, now this is about Sodom. It says, Cieza, who knew the northern coast well, described a native legend in which the practice of homosexuality was brought to the Ecuadorian coast. So, it's talking about South America, by giants. One day, all the giants were engaged in su maldita sodomy. The Creator sent fire from heaven to consume them as a punishment for their crimes. Now, this is the ancient Indian folktale. They would talk about these giants. And when we say giants, we're not 200 feet. We're talking about 7 foot, 8 foot, 9 foot, 10 foot area. Just like the Bible's talking about. Goliath wasn't no 200 foot person, but they call him a giant because he was like 7, 8 foot, or 9 foot. And the source is the Quito manuscript by Fernando de Montesinos, page 7980. Genesis 19, verse 24, it says, Then the Lord rain upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. So they telling the same story. You're like, wait a minute, there were no giants in Sodom. Yes, it was, because Sodom and Gomorrah, there were 5 Canaanite cities. And we know the Canaanites were known for being giant or abnormally tall. All right? Like Goliath. Okay, now, because Goliath was a Philistine, right? He was from the seed of Ham, seed of Canaan. Now, let's go to the next slide. It says otro, meaning other in Spanish. And this is from the book of Jubilees, chapter 20 and verse 5. Now, the book of Jubilees was always called the Little Genesis. There's some things we can use in it, and this right here we're going to use. It says, and in the 42nd Jubilee, in the first year of the 7th week, Abraham called Ishmael and his 12 sons, and Isaac and his 2 sons, and the 6 sons of Keturah and their sons. And he commanded them that they should observe the way of the Lord, that they should work righteousness and love each his neighbor, and act on the manner amongst all men, that they should each so walk with regard to them that as to do judgment in righteousness on the earth. And they should circumcise their sons according to the covenant which he had made with them, and not deviate to the right hand or the left of all the paths which the Lord hath commanded us. And that we should keep ourselves from all fornication and uncleanness, and renounce from amongst us all fornication and uncleanness. And if any woman or maid commit fornication amongst you, burn her with fire, and let them not commit fornication with her after their eyes and heart. And let them not take to themselves wives from the daughters of Canaan, for the seed of Canaan will be rooted out of the land. And he told them of the judgment of the giants and the judgment of the Sodomites, how they had been judged on account of their wickedness and had died on the account of their fornication, uncleanness, and mutual corruption through fornication. That's why he brought up that fire, because these giants that were in the land of Sodom were destroyed by fire. The same as it's been spoken in the native Indian legend. Same way, written in the ancient Hebraic text. Next one. Next slide. It says, in a great battle, the Kichi were miraculously assisted by swarms of wasps and hornets, which flew in the face of their foes, stinging and blinding them. Now, the Kichi it's a language group, a kingdom in Mesoamerica, ancient Mesoamerica. The Mayans spoke Kichi, for your understanding, right? It says, so that they could not wield weapons nor see to make an effective resistance. After this battle, the surrounding races became tributaries to them. Source: Myths of Mexico and Peru by L. Spetz, page 230. Exodus 23:28. It corroborates perfectly with the Hebraic history. It says, "And I will send hornets before thee, and shall drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite from before thee." And guess what happened after this? They became tributaries to us. Just like the legend amongst the ancient Kichians, which we know Kichi comes from the word Kish, which means Cush, which means our blackness, our dark skin in the Hebraic language. Next slide. Scalping. The scalping, and we know, is related to the North American Indian and other Indian groups as well. They were known for scalping, okay? Which, when you go back to the ancient Scythians, which I have proved that the ancient Scythians are Israelites in another video on my channel, go check that out if you haven't. Take notes. They were known for scalping as well. That's a very ancient, that's nothing new on the earth. That's a very ancient tradition. But it's written in the scriptures as well in Psalms, the 68th chapter, verse 21. It says, "But God shall wound the head of his enemies, and the hairy scalp of such as one as goeth on still in his trespasses." So this was a punishment for a trespasser. Now, the North American was doing this to his European the European invaders. He was doing it to them. Let's see. Why was he doing it? Because they were trespassing on their land. It's written in the scriptures to wound the head. God will wound the head of the enemies in the hairy scalp of such a one that goeth on still in his trespasses. So that's written in the Bible. And that's what the North American Indians were famous for doing. Scalping people. Now we know the French started scalping them, and the American government started scalping Indians because it was easier to bring a scalp than a body for the bounty. And then people started manipulating that and getting over on the government, and it just got messy. But the point is, the North American Indians were famous for that, which we know is Gad because Navajo went by that name that ended in them, Gad. They recognized themselves as the Gadites. Next slide. Snake, right? And I got, of course, the code on the bottom. It says Isaiah 6 and verse 1. "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above it stood the Seraphims." Now, seraphim in Hebrew is talking about a serpent. "Each one had 6 wings. With twain he covered his face, and with twain he covered his feet, and with twain he did fly." Why am I bringing this scripture up? Because we have written in the scriptures in Isaiah 6 about heavenly serpents, feathered winged serpents. Where do we find this? We find this in Mesoamerica, ancient Mesoamerica, among the Mexica, the Aztecs, and the Mayans, and the Kichi. They have Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan and Votan. These are all feathered serpents that they looked upon as deities. And that's what you find here, because a deity just means like godly figure. Like an angel will be considered a deity. A lot of people don't know the word demon just means deity. That's all it means. And they venerated this serpent. I'm going to read on about this feathered serpent that we find in Isaiah 6. It says, "And one cried unto another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of our hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the post of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Then said, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then flew one of the seraphims unto him, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken the tongues from off the altar, and he laid it upon my mouth, and said, Lo, this has touched thy lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thy sin purged." So this is so we can find the parallels of Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan and Votan found in the scriptures in Isaiah 6, a feathered serpent that they looked at for salvation. They looked at for purging and cleaning, of sins. And we seen that this serpent flew down and removed the iniquity of Isaiah. That's in the scripture. A lot of people don't even know that. That's a strong Hebraic parallel found in Mesoamerica among the Aztecs, the Mexica, the Kichi, the Kichians, and the Mayans. Okay. That's what this whole thing, what is this title? What's the title of this video? The Hebraic Indian affinity. Showing you the parallels in the cognates. Next slide. Dr. Bunot, that being among the Indians away toward Mississippi, the Indians there informed them that one of their traditions was a great while ago they had a common father who had the other people under him, that he had 12 sons by whom he administered his government. And that's Source View of the Hebrews by Ethan Smith, page 80. So wait a minute, they believed and taught that they had a common father, which we know is Jacob, who had 12 sons. And they are the posterity of these sons. They believe this. This is what they taught. And the View of the Hebrews, by the way, if you're not familiar with it, is basically a book of sources. He's going over a lot. That's why I put Dr. Bunot, however you say his name. I might be butchering it. He's going over that, Star of the West. He's going over James Adair's work. So many different scholars at his time, William Penn, and he's bringing forth all of their works and putting it into one book. It's a very good purchase. I always say the best books to buy is a book of sources. So they believe they came from one man that had 12 sons. Hey, that's the Hebraic doctrine. Jacob brought forth the 12 tribes of Israel. It's simple. It's not hard. We can see the connection. The Hebrew affinity is strong. But you're still going to have naysayers. You're always going to have naysayers. The scripture says that we may convince the gainsayers. That we may, meaning there's a chance we can convince them, not that we will. So, next slide, sangre meaning blood in the Spanish tongue. It says, a star in the west, an Indian daily sacrifices described. They throw a small piece of the fattest of their meat into the fire before they eat. They draw their newly killed venison through the fire. The blood they often burn. It is with them a horrid abomination to eat the blood of their game. This was a Hebrew law. Source, View of the Hebrews by Ethan Smith, page 83. So we're going to get the law that this corroborates with and matches with perfectly. It syncs with it perfectly. Now, Leviticus chapter 17, verse 5 through 6, and then we're going to jump to 10 and 11. It says, to the end that the children of Israel may bring their sacrifices, which they offer in the open field, even that they may bring them unto the Lord, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, unto the priest, and offer them for peace offerings unto the Lord. And the priest shall sprinkle the blood upon the altar of the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and burn the fat for a sweet savor unto the Lord. And that's what they would do. They would get the fattest of their meat and put it into the fire before they eat. That's what the native Indians would do, according to the Star of the West. It says, and the priest shall sprinkle the blood upon the altar of the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and burn the fat for a sweet savor unto the Lord. And whatsoever man, verse 10, and whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, that eateth any manner of blood, I will even set my face against the soul that eateth blood, and will cut him off from his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. So it was unclean for us to eat blood, and that's what we find amongst the ancient Native Americans. They didn't eat blood. It was an abomination to them. Another strong Hebraic correlation. Next slide. Time. How they kept their time. Their mode of reckoning of time is very simple. Their years begin about the vernal equinox, and their diurnal reckoning from sunset to sunset. So they recognize days from sunset to sunset, just like the Bible tells us to do. And the evening was the first day. Okay, so at evening to evening, when the sunset to sunset, that's how days are recognized within the Bible. And that's how the Native Indians recognize days. This is perfectly Mosaic. Source, View of the Hebrews by Ethan Smith, page 121. And to the right, you can see a generic Hebraic calendar. And you see the year begins around vernal equinox. And Nisan was just a bid, right? in spring. So the scriptures talk about the year beginning in spring, not in the dead of winter. Like even if you go to the ancient Romans, where you get the word March from, the word March means to grow, and that's when they begin the year, when things start to grow, right? So that's another correlation we can draw from. Final slide, and this is just extra, about 14 slide on this presentation. More proof is the use of Allah in their names and places, like you have the Rabbanal, they put all at the end of it. All meaning power, or Allah meaning power. Use of Yah in their names and places. Use of Yohewah and Yohewah Shai, like they would do the chant, just like Amos says, you would chant at the sound of the vowel in the book of Amos. The Yohewah, 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 Yohewah. They also had the name Yohewah Shai, which is found in the book James Adair wrote, Yohewah Shai, for the brothers that fall in Lashon Kodash. It says, keeping of Hebraic traditions such as Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles. And we can give you numerous accounts of that. I broke it down already in my prior videos. Hebraic Indians Part 1, I went into it, and I did plenty more videos dealing with this topic. So check out those videos for further clarity on these claims. But that's the video, brothers. I'm praying that it was edifying. I'm praying that you got something out of it. Hebraic Indian affinity, I'm praying that you took notes. Don't mind the naysayers, and I pray if you are a naysayer or gainssayer on the video, I pray that this information does open your mind, open your third eye, and you're able to see past the jargon that other organizations are trying to push or keep hidden from our people. So with that being stated, I'm going to say shalom. My prayers for Israel that we're able to become stable and grow stronger in this truth and really, shed off these dogmatic things and really begin to prove our point and actually have schools, because a lot of our people claim that we got schools, our organizations opening up schools, and we know they're not organizing schools.